Hello my dears, my name is Mariana and welcome to my channel. Today we are talking about dreams. This is a topic I've thought a lot about. I am really into dreams. I'm kind of obsessed with them. I think I got my first dream dictionary at like 9 and I've been very passionate about them ever since. And so today we're talking about something that I've been playing with for myself in my own practice for a really long time, but haven't really formally described or talked about. And so we're gonna do that today. So I am a professional archetypal tarotist, meaning that I read the cards through a depth psychological lens. And when we're talking about depth psychology, dream work, dreams are very essential. So over the last few years, I've been exploring how can we use the tarot with dreams? How do they come together to enhance and support the psycho-spiritual work? So today we are going to go through my 3 tips to begin to bridge tarot and dream work and see how it can deepen your journey of individuation. And of course, before we jump into it, make sure that you're subscribed to keep getting videos like this. And make sure you go follow me on Instagram. There are so many resources and good posts and things about learning the tarot there. You want to check it out. And I actually have another kind of secret, kind of extremely exciting announcement to make. So very soon, maybe even less than a week from when you're watching this video right now, I will launch my brand new podcast called Soror Mystica. This is an exploration of the mysteries, magic, and wisdoms of life. And the best part about this podcast is it's not just me talking into a void, kind of like what I do with these videos. It's a weird thing. I am actually a co-host with my best friend and brilliant astrologer, Christina Farella. We spend many hours on the phone a week. It's like we live in 1997. It's very cute. Our conversations are so gorgeous and we're having them alone on the phone at like 3 p.m. on a Tuesday and we're like, we should probably share this with people. I think other people would actually really like to be a part of this. So that's going to be happening extremely soon. And our first episode is on dreams. So it's a perfect segue. Look at that. It's like I almost did it on purpose. So without further ado, let's get into it. So before we really get into how to use the tarot with dreams, I want to talk about what dreams are. I'm not getting into the whole thing. We're not talking about Freud. Don't worry. Essentially, dreams are the plays, the stories that we experience at night when our unconscious is awake and the conscious mind asleep. A lot of people think that dreams are just reflections of the things we experience throughout the day, and absolutely, this is a part of dreaming. But dreams have a deeper significance. I really believe that, and I think a lot of people out there do too. They are just not sure what that significance is. So let's define what are dreams. This is one of Carl Jung's most famous quotes about what dreams are, and probably one of the best ones. The dream is a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul, opening into that cosmic night which was psyche long before there was any ego consciousness, and which will remain psyche no matter how far our ego consciousness extends. All consciousness separates, but in dreams we put on the likeness of that more universal, truer, more eternal man dwelling in the darkness of primordial night. There he is still the whole, and the whole is in him, indistinguishable from nature and bare of all egohood. That is a very pretty way of saying that dreams are these representations of our deeper truths, the realities within us that are emerging from the unconscious that can help us understand ourselves more deeply and the direction of our lives. And when we use the tarot in an archetypal perspective, we're examining them through the same lens. The tarot acts as mirrors for the inner psyche, the truths that are fundamental to who we are. And so when we pull cards, we are looking for these truths. We're trying to find them like gems in the rough. And when we get dreams, we are also trying to find out what are these deeper messages? What are these revelations that can help us figure out who we are in this moment of our lives? Therefore, I see the tarot and the dream as speaking the same language, the language of symbol and archetype. The dream does not give us something necessarily to analyze and intellectualize as much as it gives us something to feel. The same thing is true with the card. You can know what the Two of Pentacles means, but if you don't know how that feels, what the experience of that is to you, it's never really going to connect. And so if we can kind of bridge how we pull out these messages from the dreams and pull out the messages from the cards, something extraordinary emerges. So I want to give you an example of this because so far it's probably kind of abstract. I one time had a dream that I was in a Parisian apartment. It was completely dark, I was all alone, and there was just one little window in the back, and I went to it and looked out, and I saw the beautiful Parisian skyline and the Eiffel Tower, which was just glittering against the night sky. And there was this feeling in the dream of isolation and solitude, but also beauty and awe and a sense of being in a deeper communion with myself. The next day, I thought about this dream a little bit and said, well, that's really pretty, but I didn't really have anything more to do with it. And I actually had a tarot reading scheduled for myself for later that afternoon, and my tarot reader pulled, of course, the Hermit. And when I saw the Hermit, it clicked so immediately. The Hermit is this experience of solitude, of going into the inner world and experiencing yourself there. And so having this dream of being in this Parisian apartment, of course, I'm not necessarily going to think of the Hermit for that automatically, but the feeling was the same. In that apartment, I was alone and looking at the beauty around me. And with the Hermit, we are asked to go on the inner journey to discover what fills us with meaning and awe. That night, after pulling the Hermit card, I had yet another dream. I was working really hard at something, I didn't even know what it was, and just really exhausted, and then suddenly looked up and realized I was in the center of this beautiful forest. And once I realized I was there, and that everything around me was quiet, and that I was all alone, I thought, this is where happiness comes from. And that revelation in the dream pulled all of this together for me. The dream before had shown me this vision of being alone and looking at the beauty of something I love. And the dream after showed me the ability to choose to be present in that solitude and accept that something beautiful could come from this acceptance. And the dream after showed me that I can choose this solitude, that I can look up from all the exhausting effort I'm doing every day and just be where I am. And the Hermit was the card that tied these two things. As a tarot reader, I know what the Hermit invites me to do. It invites me to turn off my phone, go be by myself, get into nature, really do that inner work of meeting myself again. And so it was a really powerful little moment in my life to shift the way my energy was going. So when we are working with our dreams in the tarot, the first thing we want to do is really notice what dreams come right before and right after we pull cards. Of course, we might have dreams that have nothing to do with the cards we pull, and that's okay. We are people with a lot of multiplicity and depth, but more often than not, there will be themes that tie together our cards and our dreams. The important thing is not to look for these one-to-one correlations. It's not going to be that you dream about crossing the ocean on a rowboat and then pull the Six of Swords. That's very direct. I mean, it'll happen sometimes, but that's a little on the nose. What we want to notice is how we feel. In the dream of me being in this Parisian apartment, there's nothing about that clearly says the Hermit other than the feeling of being alone. Maybe if you did pull that Six of Swords, the following dream will be about trying really hard to get from point A to point B, and there's a lot of obstacles. Then we can say, well, the Six of Swords generally talks about transitions, moving from one mental perspective to another. And if in a dream we're literally trying to make that journey, then there we have something deeper to dig into. Once we are able to tie these things together, they'll really open us to the deeper energies and archetypes that are constellated in us in that moment. And this is one of the things I think that we question a little bit about this. Well, does the dream inspire the card or the card inspire the dream? And I think it's both, but also neither. Because when we're talking about archetypes, we're talking about things being activated, coming alive in us because it's what we need, it's what we connect to. And it's the archetype that inspires the cards we pull and the dreams we have. So rather than thinking of the dream and card kind of bouncing back and forth, sharing material, think of them as branches that stem from the same root. So let's move on to the second tip I have for you. This one is consider how a card might be reflecting a dream symbol. So as I mentioned, when we're talking about cards and we're talking about dreams, we're talking about archetypes. And archetypes are these universal patterns of experience. And a lot of the ways that we notice archetypes, that we connect to them, is through the portal of a symbol. Now, a symbol can be a lot of things, but generally it is things like roses, the caduceus that we see in the Two of Cups, but also as Hermes' staff. Other symbols we see in the tarot are fish and lizards. There's also the crescent moon and pillars. All of these are symbols that we see in the card that will a lot of times show up in the dreamscape. So let's say we have a dream where we see a white rose. What can be really useful is to look through our deck and see, is there a card that holds the same symbol? Then maybe you'll discover there is, the Fool and Death. And now we have something really interesting to explore. Maybe in this dream of seeing the white rose, you found it on someone's grave. Now we can probably bring in that death card. What is death saying that adds to this story? How can we think about this image, this symbol in the dream, not just as something our minds made up when we were sleeping, but as an invitation to contemplate deeper transformation? This is a very cute story actually. I one time had a client who wanted to talk about finding a new romance in her life. She felt very stuck. She just wasn't meeting the right people. And she pulled a lot of cards that made sense, but there was just one that really stuck out like a sore thumb. And that was the devil. And we tried a lot of ways to interpret the devil. We talked about shadow, we talked about past lovers, we talked about addiction, and none of these things seemed to fit completely. And in a last attempt to make sense of it, I said, well, have you had any dreams of being chased or monstrous figures or anything like that? And she said, I don't really know. And then thought, oh wait, yeah, a couple days ago, I dreamed of the devil. Literally can't make this up. And it wasn't so much the feeling of the devil card that matched the feeling of the dream. It was more so the symbol of the devil himself. Now there was really something to dig into. How did the symbol of the devil connect the message of the dream to the message in the card? I had another case where someone had told me that they dreamed of a statue of a woman. And then when we pulled the High Priestess card, it was so obvious that the statue reflected the same kind of posture as the High Priestess. When she had the dream, it didn't really make a lot of sense to her, but now seeing that High Priestess in that position really made her realize that the dream had been about her connecting to her wisdom and how it was separate from her. It was on a pedestal and it hadn't really come alive to live through her yet. And so through pulling that High Priestess and reflecting back on the dream, she realized that that was what was missing in her life. She understood that wisdom is really important. She worked on having this wisdom active in her life, but to some degree, it was still frozen. It was still cold. It still wasn't really alive in her. This is a place to be really curious, to be flexible, to just see what kind of opens up before you. You're not always going to have things so direct as dreaming of the devil or seeing a statue of a woman that kind of looks like the High Priestess. I one time had a dream that I saw a building be filled with electricity. And it was only when I pulled the Magician card like a week later that I realized that was the symbol I needed. The magician channeling the energy of the divine was this building being filled with that energetic divine energy. So we want to be really curious about how these cards can inspire these deeper connections. It's not going to be direct all the time. Sometimes it will, and that's always very special when that happens. But even though this is a little bit of interpretive work, it can be so juicy. So try it out and let me know how it goes. Drop it in the comments. Okay, here's the last tip. Try pulling a card to reflect on a dream. Now this one seems kind of obvious. We have a dream, it feels big, we don't know what it means, let's pull a card. Usually I would say this is probably something we don't want to do. And the reason for that is if we have a dream about running away from a big monster and then we pull the Two of Swords, we're gonna go, what? It can just complicate things more. But what I recommend instead is to pull a card around a specific element of the dream. Maybe if we're running away from a monster, there's a moment in the dream where we feel like we can't decide which way to go. And then if we pull the Two of Swords, we have a deeper perspective on that point in the dream. Maybe the dream was speaking to this dilemma in our minds about which way we want to direct our lives. Maybe in the dream we actually didn't pay that much attention to that point where we were stuck between two paths, but pulling the Two of Swords might offer a lot to reflect back on about how we are stuck between two different perspectives about where we are in life. Or maybe you have a dream about being in a restaurant and not being able to pick something off the menu. And then later you pull the Seven of Cups and realize that you're kind of too engrossed in what is possible. Your imagination is too involved in all these different things up in the sky clouding your vision, and you can't actually tap into what you most deeply want. It's totally okay if you pull a card and it doesn't make any sense to you and nothing comes of it. It doesn't mean we have to sit there for days and days and days and figure out, why did I pull the Four of Swords when I dreamt about jumping on a trampoline? Sometimes it just doesn't make sense. And that's not because there's not something to be discovered there. It's because we're still living in our own minds. We're still trying to figure out through our conscious minds rather than understanding the unconscious message. Marie-Louise von Franz, a very famous Jungian and dream analyst, said that people should not interpret their own dreams. And the reason for this is because we're always trying to figure them out through our ego experience, through what we already know about ourselves. And so we're trying to do this kind of impossible thing of figuring ourselves out from within ourselves. Sometimes a beautiful thing will come through, like my dream with this Parisian apartment and the hermit. And sometimes nothing will happen, and that's okay too. But when you do get the thing, that's what makes it really worth it. So this is where I want to end this exploration of dreams in the tarot, because I'm still kind of developing these ideas myself, and I'm going to keep playing with them, and maybe at some point I'll have a part 2 and give you more tips on how to bridge the dream world and the tarot world and make sense of them. But I really hope this video was useful and interesting and inspired you to try out some tarot dream work. Make sure that you subscribe, and make sure you go follow me on Instagram. And definitely check out Sora Mystica. This podcast is going to be so juicy and deep and wonderful and good, and me and Christina are kind of silly and hilarious together, and so it's going to be an entertaining time. I actually have to go record that podcast in about 5 minutes, so I have to go. And I hope you have a beautiful, meaningful day. I don't know why I always do this to myself, where I literally do everything in the same 4 hours, but this is a problem.